Good morning, everyone. This is Teacher Danny of Paliparan 3 Senior High School. Today's lesson is the methods of philosophical reasoning, the fallacies. First, we have to define what is fallacy. It is a wrong belief, a false or mistaken idea, the quality of being false or wrong. In some other definition, it is an obsolete, deceptive appearance or deception, a false or mistaken idea, erroneous character, an open, plausible argument using false or invalid inference. Example of this is number 1. Monkey eat bananas. Pedro eat bananas too. Therefore, Pedro is a monkey. Number 2 is Maria is intelligent. Lisa is a friend of Maria. Therefore, Lisa is unintelligent. We have a general type of fallacy. Number 1 is fallacies of relevance. Number 2, fallacies of weak induction. 3, fallacies of presumption. 4, fallacies of ambiguity. And 5 is the fallacy of grammatical analogy. First in line is the 11 fallacies of relevance. What is the fallacies of relevance? The fallacy of relevance share the common characteristics that the arguments or the argument in which they occur have premises that are logically irrelevant to the conclusion, yet the premises may seem to follow from the premises even though it does not follow logically. First is the argumentum ad baculum, or appeal to force, or appeal to stick. Omitted when one appeals to force or to treat of force to bring about the acceptance of the conclusion. Example of this is chairman of the board, all those opposed to my argument for the opening of the new department signify by saying I resign. Next is the argumentum ad misericordiam, or appeal to pity. Pity or a related emotion, such as sympathy or compassion, is appealed to for the sake of getting a conclusion accepted. Example is, Sir, hindi ako makakapag-aral. Mahirap lang po kami. Next is the argumentum ad populum, or appeal to the people. Attempting to win popular assent to the conclusion by arousing the feeling of enthusiasm of the multitude. For example, is the pose of President Donald Trump. Many people have said, I'm the world's greatest writer of 140 character sentence. We have the appeal to majority. First is the snob appeal. So in the snob appeal, it is the elite or the selected few. For example, person L says statement P, then person L is the elite. Therefore, statement P is true. In other side, we have the bandwagon. Most people, almost all people. Example, many, or all person believe statement P is true. Therefore, statement P is true. For example of this is the commercial of Joy by Michael B. So, nakalagay doon, panghugas ng buong barangay. So, that is a bandwagon. Another example is the commercial of Chris Aquino about Downy. Probada babango. Amoy ulam na ba kayo? Next is the argumentum ad populum, or the appeal to vanity. Gaining support for an argument not by the strength of the argument, but by using flattery or those whom you want to accept your argument. Example of this is in this illustration. Before I sum up, Your Honor, I'd just like to say that you're beautiful when you're mad. Another example, ang bait-bait ko talaga. Pahingi naman ng Nova. You look so radiant today. Can you help me in my assignment? You have a beach body. Can you help me load the bag inside the car? Next is the argumentum ad hominem, or argument against the person. Attacking the character of circumstances of an individual who is advancing a statement or an argument instead of trying to disprove the soundness of the argument. Example, the member of the opposition are a couple of fascists. Next argumentum ad hominem is the tokoke, or in other words, the you-to argument. Rather than trying to disprove a remark about someone's character or circumstances, one accuses the other of having the same character or circumstances. Next is the genetic fallacy. A genetic fallacy is committed when an idea is either accepted or rejected because of its source rather than its merit. For example, the label Dilawan. So pag sinabing Dilawan, we are referring to the opposition. Next is the fallacy of accident. An attempt is made to apply a general rule to all situations when clearly there are exemptions to the rule. Example is doctors and knives. So marami kasi sa mga bata takot sa doktor kasi nakikita nila kung ano yung mga gamit ng doktor. Next is ignoratio elenche, apparently refuting an opponent while actually disproving something not asserted. Next is red herring. It is an irrelevant topic is introduced in an argument to divert the attention of listeners from the original issue. Argumentum ad crumenam, or appeal to money. Supposing the conclusion must be valid because the person making the argument is wealthy. Next fallacies of quick induction, the argumentum ad vericondium, argumentum ad ignorantiam, fallacy of hasty generalization, fallacy of false cause, slippery slope fallacy, and the fallacy of weak induction. First, the argumentum ad vericondium, or the appeal to inappropriate people. Using authority as evidence, but the authority is not really an authority on facts relevant to the argument. Uses the administration of the famous to try and win support. Example of logical form. According to person A, X is true. Therefore, X is true. Example is, Oprah said that girls will go crazy for boys if they are intelligent. Next is argumentum ad ignorantiam, or appeal to ignorance, also known as argument from ignorance, or argument from lack of imagination. Saying something is true only because there is no evidence to prove it is wrong, or saying something is false only because there is no evidence to prove that it is true. Argumentum ad ignorantiam can be expressed in multiple ways, including the following. One cannot prove that it is true, therefore it is false. No one observed this occur, therefore it did not occur. Or, there is a proof to support argument X, therefore argument Y is true. Next is the fallacy of hasty generalization, also known as a fallacy of insufficient statistics, fallacy of insufficient sample, hasty induction. This fallacy is committed when a person draws a conclusion about the population based on a sample that is not large enough. It has the following form. 1. Sample S is taken from population P. 2. Sample S is a very small part of population P. 3. Conclusion C is drawn from sample S. The person committing the fallacy is misusing the following type of reasoning, which is known variously as inductive generalization, generalization, and statistical generalization. First example, my father smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day since age 14 and lived until the age of 69. Therefore, smoking really can't be bad or that bad for you. The explanation is, it is extremely unreasonable and dangerous to draw a universal conclusion about the health risk of smoking by the case study of a man. Next is the fallacy of false cause. The fallacy committed when an argument mistakenly attempts to establish a causal connection, or in other words, the post hoc ergo propter hoc, non causa, pro causa, or oversimplified cause. Next, let's go to the non causa or pro causa, or in other words, not the cause or a cause. In general, it is a fallacy of making a mistake about the ascription of some cause to an effect. This is a general category of false cause. Next is the post hoc ergo propter hoc, or in other words, after this, therefore because of this. The fallacy of arguing that one event was caused by another event merely because it occurred after that event, or if A happened, then B happened, then A must have caused B to happen. One example of that is I wore my purple sweater and my team won against all the odds. Therefore, I am going to wear that sweater to every game. Another one is Bill purchased a new Power Mac and it worked fine for a month. He then bought and installed a new piece of software. The next time he starts up his Mac, it freezes. Bill concludes that the software must be the cause of the freeze. Next is the oversimplified cause. Explaining an event by relying on causal factors that are insufficient to account for the event or by overemphasizing the role of one or more of these factors. One example of this is Coach says that the reason his team won their last game is because the team had a high carbohydrate meal before the game. Next is the slippery slope fallacy, or in other words, it is also known as the camel's nose. The arguer claims that a sort of chain reaction, usually ending in some dire consequence, will take place, but there's really not enough evidence for that assumption. Or a person asserts that some event must inevitably follow from another without any argument for the inevitability of the event in question. We have the form. Number one, event X has occurred or will might be occur. Therefore, event Y will inevitably happen. Another example, animal experimentation reduces our respect for life. If we don't respect life, we are likely to be more and more tolerant of violent acts like war and murder. Soon, our society will become a battlefield in which everyone constantly fears for their lives. It will be the end of civilization. To prevent this terrible consequence, we should make animal experimentation illegal right now. Next is the fallacy of weak analogy. This type of argument, the issue at hand is compared to another issue, which is entirely different but in some ways related, and uses the other issue for this conclusion's acceptability or rejection. Because of that, arguments by analogy rest on a comparison. Their logical structure is this: A and B are similar. A has a certain characteristic. Therefore, B must have that characteristic too. Another example, number 1, thieves are criminals. Since cheating is stealing, cheaters are criminals. Another one, guns are like hammers. They're both tools with metal parts that could be used to kill someone. Next is the fallacy of presumption. The fallacies of presumption also fail to provide adequate reason for believing the truth of their conclusions. In these instances, however, the erroneous reasoning results from the implicit supposition of some further proposition whose truth is uncertain or implausible. Again, we'll consider each of them in turn, seeking always to identify the unwarranted assumption upon which it is based. Next fallacies of presumption is the petitio principii, or begging the question, circular reasoning, or circular argument. Begging the question. Begging the question is a fallacy in which the premises include the claim that a conclusion is true, or either directly or indirectly assume that the conclusion is true. This sort of reasoning typically has the following form. Number 1, premises in which the truth of the conclusion is claimed and or the truth of the conclusion is assumed, either directly or indirectly. Number 2, claim C, which is the conclusion, is considered true. Example, number 1, since I am not lying, it follows that I am telling the truth. 2, we know that God exists. Since the Bible says God exists, what the Bible says must be true, since God wrote it and God never lies. The proof show that in order to believe that the premises are true, we must already agree that the conclusion is true. Another example for the begging of question, Bill, God must exist. Jill, how do you know? Bill, because the Bible says so. Jill, why should I believe the Bible? Bill, because the Bible was written by God. If such action were not illegal, then they would not be prohibited by law. Next, the belief in God is universal. After all, everyone believes in God. Next is the fallacy of complex question, or the florium interrogationum, or the trick question, or the false question. The complex question fallacy is committed when a question is asked. A. The rest on the questionable assumption. B. To which all answers appear to endorse that assumption. Or two or more questions are asked, but they are not disguised as one. No matter what your answer to the second question, you will be forced to have the same answer for the first. For this example, have you stopped beating up the old ladies? If your answer is yes, in other words, so you used to beat up the old ladies. But if your answer is no, so you are still beating up the old ladies. Another example, where did you hide the wine that you stole from the client after your drunken party? But if your answer is somewhere, so you stole it. But if your answer is nowhere, so you drank it all. Another example, are you going to admit that you're wrong? If your answer is yes, so admitting that you're guilty. If your answer is no, accepting guilty but not admitting it. Next is the black or white fallacy, or the fallacy of false dichotomy, or false dilemma. Only two alternative states are presented, when in fact more possibilities exist. A spectrum of possible choices exists between two extremes. Example, either you're with God or against Him, or I thought you were a good person, but you weren't at the church. Exception, there may be cases when a number of options really is limited. Example, if an ice cream man just has chocolate and vanilla left, it would be a waste of time insisting that he has mint chocolate chip. It is also not a fallacy if other option exists, but you are not offering other option as a possibility. Example, between mom and Billy. Billy, it's time for bed. Can I stay up and watch a movie? You can either go to bed or stay up for another 30 minutes and read. Non sequitur fallacy. It is a Latin phrase that means it doesn't follow. Literary device which include the statements, saying, and conclusions that do not follow the fundamental principle of logic and reason. Non sequitur, irrelevant reason, invalid inference, non-support argument by scenario, a form or false premise, a form of questionable premise. There is a device between the premise and the conclusion, which result in something called a fallacy, giant logical jump that is totally unreasonable. Example, people generally like to walk on the beach. Beaches have sand. Therefore, having sand floors in home will be a great idea. Another example, Burger has the greatest food in town. Burger voted number one by the local paper. Therefore, Phil, the owner of the Burger, should run for president in the United States. Thank you, and God bless us all.